This session is titled Law, Regulations, and Governance Against Disinformation and on Content Moderation in Indonesia. Guiding our discussion today will be Ibu Nurma Fitri from Tifa Foundation. Ibu Nurma is a researcher and policy analyst with more than 7 years experience in a think tank and a variety of research and policy advocacy projects with the local and national governments. She is also served as a fellow at Global Public Policy Institute. For this session, as just like the previous one, there will be a Q&A session at the end of the speaking. So if you guys want to have questions addressed to the panels, please raise your hand and the moderator will call upon you. Please state your name and your affiliations and keep your questions short and straightforward. Without further ado, I would like to call Ms. Nurma Fitri to the stage to join us. Please give a big round of applause to Ms. Nurma Fitri.
Hello, good afternoon. Selamat siang semuanya. Please wait for at least one session until you can enjoy your lunch. This is an honor to me to be here moderating the very distinguished speakers that will be here. We will be having here on the panel theme on law, regulations, and governance against disinformation and on content moderation in Indonesia. For the first panelist, we will have Ms. Irene Poetranto. Ms. Irene is a doctoral candidate from the Department of Political Science, University of Toronto. Please welcome Ms. Irene and take a seat. And the second panelist, we will be having Mr. Hafizh Nabiyyin. He is the head of Freedom of Expression Division at Southeast ASEAN Freedom of Expression Network, SAFEnet. The third speaker, Ms. Yuliana Wahyuningtyas. Ms. Yuliana is Associate Professor at Universitas Katolik Indonesia, Atma Jaya. And the last one will be Mr. Matti Pohjonen. Mr. Matti is senior researcher at the University of Helsinki, Finland. Welcome to all the panelists. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the last session that we just had. For the presenter, I will allow Ms. Irene first. You will be having 15 minutes maximum, and you are free to walk around or stand up if you wish.
Oke, selamat siang semuanya, good afternoon. Nama saya Irene Poetranto dan saya akan mempresentasikan hari ini topik saya, judul paper saya adalah Challenges in Indonesia's Regulation of Disinformation and Content Moderation. I'll be speaking in English. First of all, I'd like to thank CSIS and SAIL for inviting me to present at this conference, and thank you to all the staff that made this event possible. So briefly, this is the agenda for my talk. I will start with the research questions that were provided to me. I'll provide a little bit of background and context. I'll talk a little bit about the role and spread of disinformation, as well as gaps in platforms' efforts to respond to disinformation. Then I'll talk about the governance efforts on digital platforms to encourage content moderation, ranging from self-regulation, co-regulation, and regulation. Then I'll speak about the common criticism against these different forms of regulation and how Indonesia can address gaps and criticism. I have a lot of slides to go through, so I'll be talking a bit fast. Ngomongnya akan ada cepat, jadi mohon maaf. If you have any questions, kalau ada pertanyaan, akan dengan senang hati saya menjawab sesudah presentasi. So these are the two research questions that were provided to me for the paper. How are laws and regulations applied to digital platforms in terms of content moderation? And what role do these platforms play in the spread and control of disinformation? And secondly, how do different regulatory approaches compare and contrast with Indonesia's current laws and regulations against disinformation? So just a bit of background. As you all know, terms such as hoaxes, fake news, disinformation have frequently been used in news articles and reports in Indonesia and around the world. However, the definition, right, for these terms remain fragmented, and that's true not just for Indonesia, but also in the literature, right? It's true around the world as well. And so there have been challenges in finding a common vocabulary when we're referring to these issues or terms. In my paper, I use the term disinformation to refer broadly to false information that is conveyed intentionally to confuse other people, which is a definition from Kamus Besar Bahasa Indonesia, or the large dictionary of the Indonesian language. In terms of a specific background on disinformation in Indonesia, concerns regarding disinformation have escalated since the 2014 general election. The 2019 general election in particular was very complex, with many voters aged 17 to 35 years old who were voting for the first time, which contributed to the heavy use of social media by political parties. In the 2024 general election, the number of young or first-time voters is expected to increase. Specifically, millennials and Gen Z, defined as those born between 1980 and 1994, and between 1995 and 2000s, respectively, will make up over 50% of voters in Indonesia. So the role of social media is even more important in the 2024 election. As you all know, content moderation concerns our right to free expression, right? And in Indonesia, we should be concerned with the human rights impact of content moderation and disinformation efforts because Indonesia has ratified the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, in 2005, in which the right to freedom of opinion and freedom of expression is protected under Article 19. Indonesia had also supported a landmark UN resolution which reaffirmed that the same rights that people have offline must also be protected online, in particular, freedom of expression. First, I'd like to talk about the spread of disinformation, right? So as I said before, disinformation has been facilitated by the rapid uptake of social media by Indonesian and by others around the world. In particular, highly mobile markets like Indonesia, where people spend over 5 hours per day on their mobile devices, have made them susceptible to disinformation. They're just exposed to a lot of disinformation. And research has shown that when people use mobile phones, they may be more efficient, but they engage in less information processing, they're less attentive, and less vigilant to misinformation compared to when you're using PC. Hello? Okay. And another research has also shown that users of mobile phones tend to share more unreliable news than those who use a computer or a web browser. And as mentioned yesterday as well, and in one of the talks by Bradipta, if I'm not mistaken, there are also features of social media sites and algorithms that have contributed to the spread of misinformation, also known as mechanisms for virality. So for example, X, formerly known as Twitter, has features allowing people to share or retweet posts easily. TikTok uses machine learning models to predict engagement and make recommendations of content to users. And Facebook has video features such as Reels and Facebook Watch, which rely heavily on algorithmic content recommendations based on engagement. And of course, some of the content that people engage with might contain disinformation. Additionally, we know that misinformation, disinformation, false news, hoaxes, they're much more likely to be shared than factual content, right? The Nobel Prize-winning journalist Maria Ressa said that, quote, Facebook allows lies laced with anger and hate to spread faster and further than facts, which are really boring. And we know, research has shown as well, that Facebook prioritizes content that makes people angry 5 times in their algorithms than the content that people give thumbs up or hearts, right, that people like. In terms of how platforms respond to disinformation, we can see at least these 3 types, right? First, platforms have set standards for online content and activities known as their terms of service or community standards. They've employed moderators, human moderators, algorithmic moderation systems, and have employed oversight councils as well. So you know that Meta, for example, has an oversight board. And platforms also issue transparency reports. We know, however, that there are gaps in how platforms respond to disinformation and other types of unlawful content. So first of all, social media companies' enforcement of their own community standards or terms of service has been known to be weak, haphazard, and inadequate. When it comes to smaller companies, so not big companies like Facebook or Instagram, which are part of Meta, of course, they often have even lower standards and make less efforts to enforce community standards. And when it comes to human moderators, of course, these people have often lacked resources, including the mental health toll that they suffer from having to moderate violent content, right, objectionable content. And we often don't know how many human moderators are there that platforms have, how many cover each language, what is the ratio of moderators per language, right? So there's a lot of things that we don't know about human content moderators. We also know that there's a lack of transparency in the use of automated content moderation or algorithmic content moderation. They are known to be opaque, unaccountable, poorly understood. And when it comes to disinformation, when there's a range of nuanced variations in speech, right, local context, local dialects, they would make automated moderation challenging. When it comes to transparency reports, again, in theory, transparency reports were supposed to provide more insight into how platforms engage in content moderation. Yet, there have been serious failures in transparency reporting. So, for example, when transparency reports tell us the numbers and percentages of which content categories got removed, it does not tell us why or how these decisions were taken. And research has also shown that none, like 0, of the transparency reports issued by social media companies fully adhere to the Santa Clara principles, which set standards on content moderation, and that most companies have continued to conceal or obfuscate or hide their internal content moderation practices and flagging processes. In other words, social media companies have only become less transparent, not more transparent, in their handling of user-generated content and how they enforce their rules or standards. Understanding that there have been these failures and the fact that platforms have lacked the ability to respond effectively and efficiently to disinformation, we've seen the impact in the 2007 Rohingya crisis in Myanmar, which contributed to the genocide of the Rohingyas, and the 2022 Brazil electoral disinformation. Governments are increasingly drafting responses to better regulate digital platforms and how they respond to disinformation, ranging from non-regulatory activities like having digital literacy campaigns. Indonesia has Si Berkreasi, for example, to co-regulation and then regulation. So an example of co-regulation is an effort by the European Union, the EU, called the Digital Services Act, which aims to create oversight on platforms as content moderation policies. So the DSA mandates, for example, risk assessments and independent algorithm audits. Again, because algorithms are known to be opaque and not transparent. So mechanisms that are part of the DSA include trusted flaggers, which are entities, so individuals or organizations that have expertise in flagging harmful or illegal content, and digital service coordinators who are responsible for the DSA's application within an EU member state. Australia has also moved from voluntary regulation to a mandatory co-regulatory model. Australia released a draft communications legislation amendment called Combating Misinformation and Disinformation Bill, which has been delayed. And Australia had a voluntary regime called the Code of Practice on Disinformation and Misinformation, which was developed by their industry association called Digital Industry Group, or DG. So the members include Meta, Alphabet, and other tech companies. And Australia moved from voluntary regulation, meaning no regulation, to co-regulation, because they realized, again, that there have been failures in self-regulation, right? So under this new bill, it's supposed to allow the Australian Communications and Media Authority, ACMA, which is the regulator, to examine how platforms deal with online mis and disinformation, and to request changes to processes, so not on content, right? And they can set industry standards as a last resort. Meaning, these changes are not to give the regulator, ACMA, arbitrary powers to determine what content is true or false, and it cannot direct specific posts to be removed, so it focuses on processes and not on content. And therefore, under this proposed bill, platforms will continue to be responsible for the content on their services and not governments. Oh no, okay. Okay, so I'll just wrap up. So another form of regulation is Germany's NetzDG, which mandates social media companies to remove content that is illegal within 24 hours. And if it's not obvious, then they have 7 days to investigate or they risk fine. So again, I'm going to go really fast. Indonesia, of course, has the EIT law, Undang-Undang Informasi dan Transaksi Elektronik, amended in 2016 and 2023, and it has all these articles that have been applied to disinformation, Article 28, Article 40, and so on. And we also have the Ministerial Regulation, Peraturan Menteri Kominfo, number 5/2020, which is inspired by the NetzDG. It has mechanisms for urgent requests, requiring companies to take down content within 4 hours, whereas for other prohibited content, they must do so within 24 hours. And if they fail to do so, then platforms will be sanctioned. So these are just some of the common criticism against efforts to regulate. Again, the fact that there's no common definition of what is disinformation has created issues with regard to consistency of what is being blocked. The EIT law and the MR5, Undang-Undang ITE dan Permen Kominfo have been criticized for using overbroad or vague provisions that facilitate the arrest and prosecution of internet users. SAFEnet, we have a person from SAFEnet here on the panel, found 393 people were criminalized under articles of the UU ITE, EIT law from 2013 to 2021, so that's obviously really problematic. And whereas the NetzDG and DSA, again, focuses on processes and not content, in contrast, Indonesia's approach have prioritized content, not processes, including by criminalizing internet users, right, through overbroad provisions, and takes a punitive approach against platforms with very short time frames, right, as stipulated by Permen 5. So they have to remove content within 24 hours. And again, this short time frame creates a dilemma. Either they comply quickly, but violate free expression, or do not comply, they would face government sanctions. And then finally, there's this risk of overblocking, right, where companies would just remove content to avoid being sanctioned. And the fact if something got blocked wrongly, then there's no remedy mechanisms for people to get the order removed. And there are no procedural safeguards to ensure that the regulator, in this case Kominfo, will not abuse provisions in UU ITE or MR5. And then, almost done. So how Indonesia can address gaps in platform efforts. Indonesia can improve its regulation so that there is more clarity and consistency in the terms and definitions used. What is disinformation, for example? It can include in the regulation to make social media companies create transparency reporting that is more meaningful. And it can make algorithmic content moderation be more transparent and understandable, and advocate for more resources and support for human content moderators, including those that regulate Bahasa Indonesia content. So in summary, in closing, there's a need to reframe Indonesia's approaches to regulating disinformation and content moderation. There's a need to ensure that Indonesia's approaches through regulation addresses fundamental concerns and not just the symptoms. And then finally, that they protect freedom of speech and expression because Indonesia has ratified ICCPR and supported the UN resolution that affirmed that human rights must be protected offline and online. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Irene. please give Miss Irene a round of applause. And yeah, it's a very incredible, insightful presentation about the inefficiency of both platforms and government system, regulation, and policies pertaining to the disinformation and content moderation, not only in Indonesia, but I think also globally in Australia, also in Europe. She also emphasized the pressing need to reform existing laws, especially in Indonesia and policy as well, to enhance protection against disinformation, strengthen content moderation, and diminish threats to democratic values and human rights. The next speaker is Mr. Hafizh. You will be having 15 minutes, and for the next 15 minutes, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you, Moderator. Selamat siang semuanya. First of all, Moderator, can I deliver my presentation in Indonesian so I can make it quicker? Okay, karena udah pada mau makan siang juga kan, jadi biar nggak terlambat. Oke, selamat siang semuanya. Sebelum perkenalkan, nama saya Hafizh dari SAFEnet. Di sini saya akan presentasikan paper yang saya tulis bersama rekan saya Balkis yang juga hadir di sini tentang content moderation ahead of Southeast Asia General Elections, case of hate speech in Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. Ya, jadi paper ini sebenarnya ditulis, mungkin boleh next. Oke, jadi paper ini sebenarnya ditulis karena kami melihat perkembangan dari kawasan Asia Tenggara, khususnya organisasi regional yang ada di kawasan ini, yaitu ASEAN, di mana dalam beberapa tahun terakhir, sebenarnya ASEAN itu mengalami progres. Dari yang awalnya sejak berdiri merupakan organisasi yang economic centric, menjadi organisasi yang juga menyentuh isu-isu hak asasi manusia dan demokrasi. Ini setidaknya terlihat dari beberapa produk-produk kesepakatan atau perjanjian begitu ya yang diciptakan oleh ASEAN seperti ASEAN Declaration of Human Rights di 2012 dan juga ASEAN Charter di tahun 2007 di mana di sana dimasukkan juga nilai-nilai terkait dengan demokrasi dan juga hak asasi manusia. Nah, tetapi kontras dengan itu, kita lihat bahwasanya proses dalam tanda kutip demokratisasi di kawasan itu ternyata tidak berjalan dengan baik selama 5 tahun ke belakang. Kita lihat berbagai report, di sini kami mengutip report dari Freedom on the Net, di mana di situ dikatakan bahwasanya terdapat tren akan pertumbuhan rezim yang disebut dengan rezim otoritarianisme digital. Nah, salah satu indikator yang digunakan adalah bahwasanya mereka menilai begitu bagaimana kemudian peran negara dalam membatasi konten-konten dan juga memastikan bahwasanya dunia digital itu dapat menjadi lingkungan yang aman bagi kelompok minoritas. Nah, karena kenapa ini kemudian penting? Karena menurut berbagai studi, seperti studinya Paladino, di situ dikatakan bahwasanya manipulasi di tingkat grassroots itu juga salah satu disebabkan oleh hate speech dan fake news yang dilakukan oleh pemimpin politik begitu. Jadi di sini negara-negara kawasan ASEAN juga tidak terlepas dari apa yang kemudian mewabah yaitu hate speech tadi. Nah, kemudian Bat and Banaji dalam studi juga menyoroti begitu ya bagaimana kemudian dampak hate speech ini terhadap berbagai vulnerable groups di beberapa negara. Next. Iya. Jadi objektif dari riset ini sebenarnya adalah bagaimana kemudian kami meng-compare begitu membandingkan antara kebijakan-kebijakan moderasi konten yang ada di 3 negara demokrasi di Asia Tenggara yang menurut berbagai laporan, berbagai indikator begitu juga dikatakan sebagai negara yang relatif demokratis dibandingkan dengan negara-negara lainnya. Kami sengaja tidak mengambil Timor Leste karena kami menganggap pengaruh 3 negara ini, Indonesia, Malaysia, dan Filipina itu relatif lebih besar di kawasan dibanding Timor Leste. Nah, kemudian skupnya tadi 3 negara tadi dan juga isu yang kami fokuskan di sini adalah isu tentang hate speech atau ujaran kebencian begitu ya. Bukan disinformasi ataupun cyberbullying atau harmful content lainnya. Nah, tetapi ini tidak menutup kemungkinan sebenarnya bahwasanya terkadang hate speech itu juga berkelindan begitu dengan apa yang disebut dengan disinformasi, misinformasi dan lain sebagainya. Next. Nah, metode risetnya ini library research dan juga kami mewawancarai beberapa tokoh ya bisa dibilang ya, tokoh pegiat hak digital yang ada di masing-masing negara begitu. Next. Oke, next. Ya, untuk temuannya sebenarnya di sini kami membatasi riset ke dalam 3 pemilu nasional terakhir di ketiga negara. Jadi di Indonesia di pemilu 2019, kemudian di Malaysia di pemilu tahun lalu 2022 dan juga di Filipina di pemilihan presiden tahun lalu di 2022. Nah dari temuan kami melihat bahwasanya ada ratusan ribu, bahkan ada jutaan konten yang beredar di tiap negara Asia Tenggara yang memiliki kandungan hate speech. Itu dilihat dari data dari platform media sosial seperti Meta di sini, ataupun dari monitoring yang dilakukan oleh CSO, seperti CIG yang dilakukan oleh CIG di Malaysia, di mana mereka menemukan hampir 100 ribu hate speech yang berkaitan dengan yang menyerang kelompok-kelompok minoritas begitu ya. Di mana 39 diantaranya itu merupakan hasutan untuk melakukan kekerasan di dunia nyata. Nah, yang jadi menarik di sini adalah bahwasanya ujaran kebencian itu kerap kali menargetkan kelompok-kelompok minoritas atau kelompok-kelompok rentan yang ada di negara tersebut. Seperti di Indonesia itu ada kelompok Tionghoa dan juga kelompok LGBTIQ, kemudian di Malaysia ada isu 3R, Race, Royalty, and Religion, ada juga LGBTIQ dan juga refugees dan migran karena gelombang pengungsi yang cukup besar di Malaysia. Kemudian di Filipina yang menjadi target justru karena Filipina secara budaya lebih liberal dalam tanda kutip, jadi menjadi target itu lebih kepada perempuan-perempuan yang oposisi atau yang kritis terhadap pemerintahnya atau pemerintahan Duterte kemarin ya. Next. Nah, lalu bagaimana sebenarnya peraturan yang dimiliki negara-negara, ketiga negara ini untuk mencegah penyebaran hate speech sebagaimana tadi begitu ya. Jadi sebenarnya kalau kita ngelihat ke konstitusinya, ketiga negara sudah memiliki semacam safeguard bagi tiap-tiap untuk melindungi lah kelompok rentan dari kekerasan, termasuk untuk menjamin martabatnya, menjamin perlindungannya, menjamin hak atas rasa amannya begitu ya. Tetapi ketika kita melihat peraturan turunan ini di bawah konstitusi ada di peraturan perundang-undangannya, kita bisa ngelihat ada banyak juga sebenarnya undang-undang yang sudah disahkan, terutama di Indonesia ya. Kita tahu ada KUHP, kemudian ada juga undang-undang ITE yang tadi juga sempat disinggung sama Mbak Irene, di mana undang-undang itu sebenarnya mengatur juga tentang larangan akan dilakukan ujaran kebencian. Atau kalau di KUHP ada larangan untuk melakukan penistaan agama begitu ya. Tetapi yang ada justru undang-undang tersebut dijalankan secara apa yang kami sebut sebagai eksesif begitu. Karena yang dipidana atau yang dikriminalisasi itu bukannya orang-orang yang menghasut kebencian saja, tetapi juga orang-orang yang ternyata kritis terhadap negara, kritis terhadap pemerintah, atau kritis terhadap orang-orang yang memiliki kekuasaan ekonomi dan politik. Nah, hal yang sama juga sebenarnya terjadi di Malaysia. Di mana di Malaysia itu juga ada The Sedition Act, di mana peraturan ini juga sering digunakan begitu untuk mengkriminalisasi aktivis atau oposisi atau orang-orang yang kritis terhadap negara. Sementara di Filipina juga serupa, di mana di situ ada Cybercrime Prevention Act yang disahkan di tahun 2012, di mana juga ada pasal mengenai cyber libel, yang mana itu juga sering digunakan untuk mengkriminalisasi aktivis atau mengkriminalisasi oposisi pemerintah. Nah kemudian kalau kita turun lagi ke aspek kebijakan pemerintah, kita bisa ngelihat di Indonesia ada peraturan pemerintah nomor 71 tahun 2019 dan juga Permenkominfo 5 ya, yang mana di situ juga mengatur secara lebih rigid tentang bagaimana kemudian negara memiliki wewenang untuk melakukan moderasi konten. Tapi memang tentu ada banyak catatan yang kita kritisi di peraturan-peraturan ini, bagaimana peraturan ini justru semakin mencengkram, di mana negara semakin mencengkram arus informasi yang ada di negara tersebut. Sementara itu kalau kita lihat di Malaysia, di sana ada content code, di mana di sini memungkinkan adanya semacam self-regulatory body ya, bagi media-media yang ada di sana untuk membuat semacam guideline bagi konten moderasi. Tetapi yang dilibatkan di sana hanya industri media begitu, jadi tidak melibatkan secara multi-stakeholder. Nah sementara kalau kita ngelihat di Filipina itu tidak ada kebijakan yang secara lebih rigid mengatur tentang hate speech. Sementara itu kalau lebih spesifik lagi peraturan terkait pemilu, kita ada Perbawaslu dan juga ada PKPU yang secara rigid juga mengatur tentang larangan untuk melakukan hate speech selama kampanye. Sementara di Malaysia juga ada undang-undang yang mengatur tentang itu, sementara di Filipina tidak ada undang-undang yang secara rigid mengatur tentang itu. Next. Oke, lalu bagaimana kemudian dampak terhadap vulnerable group? Tadi kita udah memiliki ada kerangka regulasi yang sebenarnya bisa mencegah terjadi penyebaran hate speech. Tapi ternyata ada banyak dan bahkan kalau kita melihat ke pemilu-pemilu sebelumnya itu ada dampak-dampak juga yang dirasakan oleh kelompok minoritas dari ujaran kebencian yang tadinya hanya bersirkulasi di dunia daring ini. Jadi di Indonesia ada kekerasan di Papua seperti yang kita tahu, kemudian ada juga ancaman terhadap minoritas Tionghoa, di mana pada saat itu di tahun 2019 banyak beredar hoax, ada tentara yang diimpor dalam tanda kutip ya dari Tiongkok untuk mengamankan demonstrasi pasca pemilu. Kemudian ada juga kekerasan terhadap LGBTIQ, di mana isu LGBT juga sangat sering dipolitisasi, digunakan untuk menyerang lawan politik, dan ini menurut data dari LBH Masyarakat berujung terhadap berbagai bentuk kekerasan yang dialami oleh mereka di Indonesia. Next. Nah, bagaimana kemudian dengan di Malaysia? Di Malaysia targetnya itu lebih kepada refugees dan migran begitu. Bagaimana ada banyak doxing yang dilakukan terhadap para refugees dan migran yang juga berujung pada penyerangan atau persekusi di dunia nyata. Begitu juga dengan kelompok LGBTIQ yang mana pada tahun lalu ketika masa kampanye itu dilakukan juga semacam penggerebekan begitu dalam perayaan Halloween yang mereka lakukan. Next. Nah, sementara di Filipina dampak ini lebih kepada psikologis. Bagaimana kemudian hate speech yang diarahkan terus terhadap kandidat-kandidat perempuan, termasuk Leni Robredo dan juga Sara Duterte ya, dua kandidat perempuan yang maju sebagai presiden dan wakil presiden, meskipun musuhan begitu. Tetapi hate speech yang mengarah sama mereka itu sama. Jadi serangan-serangan misoginis, perendahan perempuan, menganggap perempuan tidak kapabel untuk menjadi pemimpin, yang mana ini kemudian juga dianggap membahayakan demokrasi Filipina jika kita mengutip karena saya mengutip Cheryl Soriano ya, salah satu profesor di universitas. Next. Nah, kemudian pertanyaan yang muncul adalah setelah kita mengetahui bahwasanya regulasinya tidak cukup, bagaimana kemudian proses pembuatan regulasi-regulasi ini? Apakah pembuatan regulasi-regulasi ini sudah cukup untuk melibatkan masyarakat sipil begitu ya, terutama kelompok-kelompok rentan yang tadi terdampak oleh pembuatan regulasinya. Nah, di Indonesia itu dari awal sebenarnya, dari awal proses tata kelola internet, masyarakat sipil dilibatkan. Tetapi yang perlu menjadi catatan adalah masyarakat sipil yang dilibatkan oleh Kominfo itu masyarakat yang yang lebih memiliki agenda-agenda dalam tanda kutip sejalan dengan pemerintah. Sementara CSO yang lebih kritis, yang lebih pendekatannya lebih konfrontasional begitu ya, itu jarang atau bahkan tidak pernah dilibatkan dalam pembuatan regulasi-regulasi terkait moderasi konten. Narasumber kami di sini menyebutnya sebagai dalam tanda kutip ya LSM plat merah begitu, karena agenda yang dijalankan itu sejalan dengan agenda negara atau lebih banyak mendukung program-program pemerintah. Nah, hal serupa juga sebenarnya terjadi di Malaysia, di mana LSM yang dilibatkan atau NGO-NGO yang dilibatkan dalam pembuatan kebijakan juga NGO-NGO yang memiliki sebenarnya hubungan yang sudah baik atau sudah mesra dengan pemerintah. Sementara NGO-NGO yang kritis itu juga tidak dilibatkan. Sementara itu di Filipina proses pembuatan kebijakan itu lebih terbuka, bagaimana meskipun ada beberapa NGO yang konfrontasional yang tidak dilibatkan oleh dalam pembuatan kebijakan, tetapi mereka tetap memiliki kesempatan untuk mengirimkan ya semacam position paper untuk kemudian dipertimbangkan untuk dibahas dalam congressional hearing. Next. Nah, konklusi dari apa yang tadi sudah saya paparkan, yang pertama, hate speech terhadap kelompok rentan, hate speech terhadap kelompok rentan itu masih menjadi masalah di region begitu ya. Bagaimana kelompok minoritas atau kelompok rentan di ketiga negara itu masih merasa tidak aman ketika proses pemilu berlangsung karena banyaknya ujaran kebencian yang mengarah kepada mereka di ranah digital. Yang kedua, terdapat perbedaan pandangan begitu di antar negara-negara mengenai urgensi untuk membuat peraturan terkait dengan moderasi konten. Indonesia dan Malaysia sudah memilikinya, tetapi di Filipina mereka tidak melihat itu sebagai sesuatu yang penting karena mereka mengupholding begitu ya freedom of expression. Jadi ketika negara terlalu banyak mencampuri urusan peredaran atau sirkulasi informasi di media sosial, yang ditakutkan justru ini akan menjadi instrumen bagi negara untuk membatasi kebebasan berekspresi secara berlebihan. Kemudian yang ketiga, kerangka regulasi yang ada di negara-negara ini masih terbatas, tetapi justru itu eksesif begitu. Tadi kita bisa ngelihat ada Undang-Undang ITE di Indonesia, ada Sedition Act di Malaysia, ada Cybercrime Prevention Act di Filipina, di mana undang-undang itu sebenarnya tidak dapat memproteksi atau tidak secara rigid. Seperti di Indonesia, kelompok-kelompok rentan itu tidak sepenuhnya disebutkan secara rigid di Undang-Undang ITE begitu. Yang disebut yang di versi lama ya, di 2016 itu hanya suku, agama, ras. Dan satu lagi antar golongan, nggak tahu antar golongannya apa yang dimaksud gitu kan. Tetapi kelompok-kelompok rentan lain seperti kelompok disabilitas, kelompok LGBTIQ atau kelompok-kelompok lain itu tidak secara gamblang disebutkan dalam peraturan-peraturan itu. Nah, jadi justru peraturan-peraturan ini digunakan untuk merepresi atau mengkriminalisasi orang-orang yang mengungkapkan ekspresinya secara kritis termasuk terhadap negara. Lalu yang keempat, partisipasi masyarakat sipil itu masih terbatas, khususnya bagi masyarakat sipil yang bergerak di bidang hak asasi manusia dan demokrasi. Mana pada akhirnya proses tata kelola internet seringkali tidak atau abai gitu terhadap prinsip-prinsip yang sebenarnya juga tercantum dalam konstitusi tiap-tiap negara. Next. Oke, terakhir di sini ada rekomendasi begitu ya yang juga sudah kami susun. Yang pertama adalah pendirian Dewan Media Sosial di tiap-tiap negara. Jadi ini sebenarnya sudah menjadi wacana juga diskursus di global, di mana Dewan Media Sosial ini diharapkan nanti dapat menjadi wadah koregulasi. Tadi Mbak Irene juga sempat menyinggung juga tentang self-regulasi, koregulasi. Jadi ini diharapkan bisa menjadi wadah koregulasi bagi seluruh stakeholder yang berkaitan atau yang terdampak dengan praktik moderasi konten. Jadi dia tidak hanya melibatkan industri media seperti yang ada di Malaysia, tetapi dia bisa melibatkan masyarakat sipil juga, bisa melibatkan jurnalis juga, platform media sosial juga, sehingga keputusan-keputusan yang diambil terkait dengan moderasi konten itu dapat menampung aspirasi dari banyak pihak dan dapat dijalankan secara lebih komprehensif. Nah, nantinya SMC ini bisa digunakan sebagai mekanisme pengganti pendekatan-pendekatan punitif yang justru sering disalahgunakan oleh aktor-aktor negara tadi. Nah, yang kedua adalah pendekatan yang kami sebut sebagai Mapilindo. Indonesia, Malaysia, dan Filipina sudah memiliki sejarah panjang begitu ya tentang bagaimana bekerja sama untuk mengagendakan yang terakhir keamanan di Laut Sulu begitu. Nah, dalam konteks ini kami melihat bahwasanya perlu juga ada pendekatan kolaborasi antara 3 negara yang dalam tanda kutip paling demokrasi di kawasan Asia Tenggara untuk juga memasukkan agenda-agenda moderasi konten ini di dalam forum-forum ASEAN. Karena ASEAN dalam beberapa tahun belakangan sangat concern begitu dengan isu-isu siber, dengan isu transformasi digital dan lain sebagainya. Tapi bagaimana kemudian transformasi digital dan lain-lain ini dapat tetap upholding human rights dan demokrasi. Karena kita tahu negara-negara di kawasan juga mayoritas itu adalah negara-negara yang otoriter atau negara-negara yang semi otoriter. Jadi kami melihat bahwasanya triumvirat 3 negara ini begitu ya, itu dapat berkolaborasi untuk memajukan agenda-agenda tentang pengaturan bersama. Agar dapat, seperti yang di Uni Eropa mereka berhasil mengesahkan Digital Services Act begitu kan, mana untuk menekan platform media sosial. Nah, ketika ASEAN, negara-negara ASEAN ini bisa berkolaborasi, itu dapat menjadi sangat potensial tentunya untuk menciptakan tata kelola moderasi konten yang lebih berlandaskan terhadap HAM dan demokrasi di kawasan. Sekian dari saya, terima kasih.
Yeah, thank you, Mas Hafizh. It's very interesting presentation related to hate speech in the Southeast Asia region. Highlighted the case from Indonesia, the Philippines, and also Malaysia. A few points that he made. The first, hate speech against vulnerable groups are common problem in the region, actually. However, each country has different view on the need for special regulation governing hate speech. And the existing regulatory framework for hate speech that this country have is still very limited. However, it's very excessive. And he also expressed the need for a necessity for a multi-stakeholder approach to regulate content at the national level, as well as promoting the adaptation of content governance policy within ASEAN or using the existing organization ASEAN based on human rights principles. The next panelist will be Ms. Yuliana Wahyuningtyas. Please, the next 15 minutes, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ibu Moderator. It's a pleasure, an honor for me to have the opportunity to stand here and share my thoughts about this topic today. And I'd like to thank especially CSIS, SAIL, and also Monash University, I think, part of the organization team, and also Atma Jaya Catholic University. And I may invite you to give a round of applause for the organizing committee and for the audience. I see many students here. I'll talk about digital platform liability for data governance in data-driven society. So I would focus a little bit on the importance of data, and in the end of my presentation, I would like to address how we should could regulate the liability for the digital platforms. Okay, Ibu Moderator, please kindly remind me if my time is almost up. Thanks. Where should I point it to? Perfect. Okay, so these are what I would like to talk about, the development of digital platforms quickly and the liability of digital platform. Let's take a look at another jurisdiction, as Ibu Irene has explained earlier about the Digital Services Act in the European Union. I would mention that also. And then let's go to our new EIT law, law number 1 of 2024, and how could we move forward after this discussion. I will start with what is different with this data-driven society, with the digital economy. So the development of the digital platform has a tremendous development, transformation of what we call now digital platform. Well, we know digital platform plays an important role as an intermediary, but that's an old story, because platforms now, they are not only intermediaries, but they have become decision makers, price setters, yeah, rules makers. So there's this high degree of control over prices, over terms and conditions, over what parties can do, what users can do on the platform to different customers, yeah? And then on different sides of the platform, if we talk about multi-sided platforms. So here we have, these are the recent developments with the digital platforms now, with interlinked products, with multi-sided platform, also with the even higher role of social commerce in Indonesia. If you want to sell something or buy something, you don't go to e-commerce, you go to certain social media. And then we have also competition in the market, but now not only in the market, it's for the market. So companies, digital platforms, they are competing for the market. They create a new market and they control the market. And then we have also product ecosystem with companies with different relevant markets. They operate in different relevant markets. They join forces and they create this product ecosystem. And even better, one company operates in different sectors. So if we go to the EU, we have this term gatekeepers, online gatekeepers. They are platforms providing online services, controlling, influencing access to online services, thereby exercising control over entire ecosystems and have a strong impact on competition and innovation in the digital field. So I sound talking more about the economic or the private sides of the digital platforms. But please bear with me. These are the criteria, but I will not explain further due to the time constraint only. So with that first slide, I hope that we can see already how this development of the role of digital platforms in the digital economy, a little bit. Now, digital platform and data. I talk about data governance, data-driven society. I talk about data is becoming very important. How come? So, here, now, with this digital economy, we learn that network effect plays a very important role. Yeah? We join a certain social media because our friends do. Yeah? We left a certain social media because our friends did. That's a very simple explanation of the network effect. A platform has a role to minimize transaction cost for users. Yeah, so it becomes very cheap if it comes to dealing with platforms, or even zero price. Focus for the digital platforms, not only to get money, but mainly now to get personal data. Well, whatever data, but personal data is very important, as we all know by now. So I talk about zero prices, we talk about price structure, we talk about a multi-sided platform. In different sides of the platform, you might find different structure of prices, and that's okay. That's part of the business models. So it's fine. This is not price discrimination, yeah, it's different. But there is something there. They allow services with zero prices mainly for these purposes, to get information about users. So here we see what we need to consider then with this development. First, that personal data is treated as an asset, but of course, personal data does not belong to the data controllers. That's different. But it is treated as an asset. It is important. But it's not commodity, yeah? That's different. And then we have self-regulation in terms of personal data, and then we talk about privacy policy. But let's check whether we check privacy policy before we agree to use a certain platform. I'm not sure. Let's check ourselves, yeah? And then the economics of free, I have mentioned earlier, this one also. So now, with this development, controlling personal data allows the digital platform, the data controller, yeah, to have a certain power in the market, not directly contribute to dominance, but it leads to certain strength in the market. So this is something that we need to consider. With this strength, yeah, it allows the digital platforms to, quote unquote, dictate what can happen on the platforms with defining the prices, the terms and conditions, the policies that I have mentioned earlier. And these are data and multi-sided platforms. It is important also that we have this classification of data, because not only personal data that is important in the digital market. Yeah, we have different types of data. For example, we have data about the companies itself, or data that is protected under the regime of intellectual property rights, for example, information about patents, and so on. And then the object of legal protection, because there are different schemes for legal protection, and we need also to pay attention on data processing and access, about how to access the data, who can access the data, how we can use that access. Yeah, and now after we learn about what happens in the background, in the kitchen of the digital platforms, let's see what happens in the front part when they deal with customers, consumers. So, talking about disinformation, it's a bit jump. I'm sorry, but it's a time constraint, yeah? First, yeah, we have different stages where consumers deal with risks when they play a part in e-commerce, basically becoming consumers. First, when they deal with ads, advertising, offers, yeah, we deal with intrusive marketing, I think we in Indonesia are very familiar with this, yeah? Intrusive marketing, unclear quality and safety of products, misleading information if we talk about this information, and then agreement. We have imbalance of bargaining power to close an agreement when we want to buy something. And then unfair terms of usages, unclear consumer rights, and so on. Performance. After we close the deal, we wait for the performance of contract, but sometimes it is not performed. Exit. After the performance or without performance, we want to exit, but sometimes you have problem to exit.
3 more minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, that I will leave it there, and let's move to another slide. Then we have this study in Europe by EPRS for this online digital platforms, online platforms. They identify different categories or different elements, like the identification of activities, sectors, the use of data, actors, and also the sources of revenue and level of control, and also a source of liability. See, what I want I try to do is to show you that before they have what later I will explain a little bit about the Digital Services Act, they have a whole lot of studies about digital platforms. And then liability. If we talk about the development in the EU, just an example, yeah, we have the Digital Service Act package consisting of the DMA, Digital Market Act, and Services Act, and they have this focus on very large online platforms and very large online search engine. So I'm trying to say that they pay attention on the classification of the online platforms. No one size fits all. Yeah, these are the digital market provisions, but I just show you, yeah, because I have just, I think by now, only 1 minute. So, and this is the Digital Services Act. I'd like to mention a little bit about dark patterns because it's also mentioned. So dark patterns is user interfaces used by some online businesses to lead consumers into making decisions that they would not have otherwise made it fully informed and capable of selecting alternatives. I have an offer of 1 month trial to use a certain software. So I click. But after 1 month, I cannot exit. Or after 1 month, they automatically deduct my credit card. And I can never exit. So that's dark patterns. Yeah, we can talk more about that in the discussion. So what the Digital Services Act does, more user empowerment, strong protection for minors, more diligent content moderation, less disinformation, more transparency and accountability. But what other thing that is important is this risk assessment. Okay, I leave it there and I go directly to the new EIT law, our new law. Yeah, this is the amendment of the EIT law. Irene has explained also about the law, so I will take advantage of not explaining again. But yeah, but I will go directly instead to wait a minute, one more. What could be missing? What could be missing? First, the classification of digital platform to define liability. It seems that everyone has the same liability. This is not very sound. And then there is also no risk assessment. and no risk mitigation provision policy. Hence, if we talk overall, there is a lacking of risk-based regulation in Indonesia. You make regulation without calculating what could be the risk. And with this risk, I want to mitigate this way. And with this, I want to regulate like this. No, you just have the regulation. You don't think about the risk. And when it happens, voila, let's think. That's difficult. Yeah? And then transparency and user choices. There is no rule on user autonomy, on opt-in, opt-out, yeah? And also reporting mechanism. How you report, how you flag disinformation. This is not clearly defined, and after this, also there is no transparency about how to analyze the report. What if it's misreporting? What if it is just, I don't know, I just want to make somebody look bad? And then auditing, there is no mention about that either, and there is also no clear provisions about empowerment of users, rules, policy, and clear terms and conditions and obligation to ensure diligent and non-arbitrary enforcement. So if there is, this digital platform, X, oh, no X, yeah, Y, there is this illegal content, hate speech. And then take it down. Yeah, the government say, take it down. Or the company itself, oh, I'll take it down. But there is no clear rules to say when. So there will be a risk of a collision between this, avoiding disinformation, and freedom of speech. And then targeted advertising for
Time's
minors.
up already.
Time's up. Okay, that's in a nutshell is that, and I think you can just read it. Thank you so much, and back to you, Ibu.
Okay. Thank you so much, Miss Yuliana. Indeed, very interesting presentation. With the fact that changing role of digital platform, especially with the marriage between social media platforms and e-commerce, there is changing role as well from intermediary to decision-making decision maker as well as price setter. For example, we have recently TikTok case, and the income for advertisement made them able to put more discount to the price of good and a lot of service in the platform, and it changed a lot for the liability of platform. Next one, we will have Mr. Matti Pohjonen.
Yes.
Please, the floor is yours.
I'll put the timer on. So firstly, I won't be able to speak in Indonesian, but I'll try to keep it quick nonetheless. So what I'll do today, and well, I'll give quick thanks to all the organizers and special support crew for making this conference such a nice and pleasant event. But what I will talk about today is I will try to provide a more comparative perspective to the many of the debates that we have been having in this panel, but also in some of the other presentations. And the title of my talk will be called Political Disinformation and Content Moderation Folklore in a Comparative Perspective. And in the presentation, I draw on about 20 years of research that I have been doing in issues around platforms, online hate speech, and disinformation. And I'm proposing a new concept that me and my colleagues have been trying to develop as a way of also complementing some of the existing research on platforms and on debates on political information. And especially given the kind of quick rise of generative AI as a very central component of the debate on disinformation. So this is one way we've been trying to conceptualize a research framework of how we could start addressing this, especially in comparative and global context. So just a very brief background. So I'm currently working as a senior researcher at the Helsinki Institute for Social Science and Humanities at the University of Helsinki, where I work with developing new digital and AI-based methods for social science and humanities and digital politics, trying to take advantage of the new types of data sources that we have available in platforms and in the kind of digital traces that we find. And I'm also co-founder of the Center for AI Futures at School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London, where we also try to conceptualize how do we understand these debates in a comparative global context. And I've been doing various things in Oxford University and so on and so forth. But so in the presentation, I'll try to bring some of the ideas that we have been reflecting on in this kind of relatively long engagement with some of the topics. And as a kind of disclaimer, I have not done specific work on Indonesia. So what I will try to do in the end is raise some questions how these might also then potentially apply on the context of the Indonesian elections. So something went off. Let's go back. There we go. So also I'm working currently on 3 different research projects that some of the themes that I'm raising today are related to. So the first one is, and these are major multi-year funded projects. So I work on the project called The Long Arm of Authoritarian States, where we look at how authoritarian states worldwide use information suppression as a strategy, and especially on how it works on the digital platforms. I also started a project called InfoLead, where we train judges and policymakers together with the Oxford University to try to understand the emerging dynamics of the information disorder, especially including debates on generative AI, to kind of raise media literacy, but the very high policy level and high legal level. And also many of the themes that I'm developing today have been developed in the project called MAPS, or Media Platforms and Social Accountability, Dynamics, Practices and Discourses, and where we explore digital media platforms as sites and debates for social accountability, and around especially in different global contexts. So how do we make social media platforms more accountable? What are the debates and how do they link to different politics around social and political issues around this? But what I will talk today, and I'm going to be very quick about this, and hopefully we have enough time for questions that follow. So in response to some of the themes that we have been addressing in the 2 days of excellent discussions today, what I want to do are two different things, and try to kind of work from these as an argument towards the kind of concepts that I'm developing. So the first part we look at from platform governance or platform policy to what we call content visibility moderation folklore. And I will explain these terms in detail in the following slides. And what I will propose from the comparative research that I've done, I will propose what we have called 3 meta-narratives of moderation folklore, where people theorize the different ways of how moderation operates in different situations, and kind of as a research heuristic or starting point to start structuring some of the more empirical research. And many of these things, as a nod to some of the anthropologists in the room, are also based on kind of ethnographic engagement around some of the themes that we have been discussing. And so then, as an open-ended question, I will try to draw some very quick comparative lessons for the Indonesia and the other 60 elections that are taking place, and how this might be possible to research one complementary perspective to some of the debates. So what is the problem? And again, we have been discussing the problem for two days already, so this is definitely nothing new that I'm raising here, but I will reiterate some of the themes of the conference and what we have been reflecting. So the key kind of background to some of the work that we have been doing is that there's 60 plus world democracies will go to polls in 2024. So I think that accounts for something like 65% of the world's population will get to cast their democratic vote. And there is a lot of political interest, political tension, geopolitical issues going around the current electoral landscape globally and Indonesia as well. At the same time, the rise of generative AI has led to observers warn that this electoral landscape in 2024 may become characterized, I'm quoting a report on this, as a year of disinformation on AI steroids. How much of that is moral panic, how much of that is real, we don't know, but there is a big debate around how do we understand especially the rise of generative AI as a potential form for generating mass-scale disinformation in the kind of electoral season. And adding on that, the challenge of this political disinformation is perhaps particularly salient for countries where young population rely on audiovisual platforms for their political information. So TikTok, other platforms that use a lot of visual material, and we know how generative AI has become very effective in producing visual material at scale or fake material at scale. So in a way, what we are trying to reflect on the problem is that what might be some of the better ways to understand this confluence of political disinformation and generative AI in this kind of comparative global context that we have been researching. And what I'm proposing is one possible way of getting there. And again, of course, this is to complement many of the different approaches that we have already been discussing. So again, when you look at ideas of content moderation and the idea of political disinformation and content moderation, there are a number of existing approaches to this object of study that we find in the research that exists. So in a way, one of them is detection. And the idea there is that how do we more effectively detect and prevent disinformation at scale, or how do we define what it is in the first place, and what types of research computational methods might help improve the scale of efficiency and accuracy of detection. So how platforms, for instance, will be able to detect and mitigate the risk of political disinformation at scale when they're doing their moderation practices. And there's a whole industry around trying to identify, linked also to hate speech and some of the other debates, that how can we define what it is in a way that becomes operational and scalable for removal and mitigation. The second is that there's a lot of work being done, including the great presentation just before, and some of them, is that there's a lot of governance and policy about the types of regulations and moderation policies that can help best mitigate the risk of political disinformation globally in Indonesia and in other countries. And again, trying to articulate the role of AI-generated disinformation in this emerging landscape. However, what we propose, and all of these approaches are fine, but we propose to complement some of these existing approaches on what we call, or at the question, or the kind of question that we should focus on is that how do social media users and communities themselves understand and adapt to the content visibility moderation systems of social media platforms globally and the algorithms driving them. And I'll try to explain what this means is that, in a way, again, a nod to the kind of anthropologists in the room, this implies an analytical shift from what platforms do or what types of moderation they do to what users think that the platforms do. So as we know, many of the moderation policies or the practice that platforms engage in are black box, they are not transparent. So there is very little knowledge about what exactly goes into the mechanisms through which content or becomes removed, or how visibility becomes improved online, recommender systems, different types of algorithms that influence the content we get on social media. So in a way, we argue that this kind of visibility moderation practices, or what Zeng and Kay call visibility moderation, has led in the proliferation of folk theories that users engage with in an effort to understand the hidden forces that determine the visibility of content on social media. And why that matters is that if we go into the argument that we are kind of following, or the working argument, is that such user perspectives, including towards generative AI, now form what we call a moderation or algorithmic folklore that users constantly engage in, especially young users, as a way to understand and explain how the black box of content moderation works. And furthermore, these user beliefs can play a very significant role during critical events such as elections, and that's why we are here all trying to discuss this. And why it's important is that how users perceive, and this is the kind of starting point that we start from, that how users perceive the role of social media platforms as neutral or impartial mediators of political information can significantly influence how the legitimacy of the democratic process is more broadly understood. So if it is considered that the moderation practices are unfair, then the information shared during elections will not be given as much importance or value, or it can be discredited. As we have seen in US elections and other things, there's a lot of debate around this. So we try to conceptualize how do we understand this dynamic, and there's some quotes I'm not going to go into there about algorithmic folklore and content moderation folklore. So we want to kind of build this into previous research we have done on what is called extreme speech, which was developed as a kind of anthropological qualifier to debates on hate speech and information disorder, together with a number of colleagues. And what I want to do is propose 3 meta-narratives of moderation folklore very quickly that might help structure some of the ways that we start looking at how do people mythologize and create knowledge about these moderation practices, and especially during election time. So again, these are based on previous research, and I'll go very quickly through them just to keep track of time. But we are all aware, given the conversations in Indonesia about the debates on buzzers. So we argue that one useful meta-narrative to start looking at this problem is the rise of what some people call disinformation influencers or buzzers. And one of the things that can be done is that how this kind of folk theories related to gaming of the moderation system or hacking the moderation system, such as trending algorithms, and how understanding the narratives around that may help us understand the issue some better and more kind of in a contextual way. And such folk theories of moderation can also help us understand what might be a growing skepticism about social media platforms if they're considered unfair and if they're considered easily gameable and recommender systems don't work. So this is the first narrative. Again, checking time, so I'll go relatively quickly through this. The second, I have the time there. The second narrative that I've been focusing on is what we call weaponization. And I've done extensive research on this, but I'll only mention it very quickly. And weaponization means, especially in situations where content moderation is considered to have failed, which in many cases applies to most of the countries in the global south. So there's a big discourse of failure that it's not actually working for us and it's unfair towards the political interest of various groups in countries in the global south. So for instance, in the context of Ethiopia, there has been a mass weaponization of recommender systems through mechanisms such as mass flagging of content, of trying to game the system for political gain during conflict. So we're trying to figure out how do we understand the discourse around this failure of content moderation as a way of giving rise to alternative tactics of trying to remove content, usually from the oppositional side. So this shows very clearly some of the campaigns that were involved around mass reporting and of trying to remove content through alternative means if the content moderation does not work in the kind of way it's supposed to work. And this moderation folklore can perhaps help us explain also how this kind of alternative tactics and organization happens, framed use, and how influential they might be. And again, very little research has been done. And I'm doing a paper currently on the weaponization, on linked to especially war and conflict and moderation systems. And the final one, which is a slightly broader one, which we're still developing, is what we call the rise of digital authoritarianism. It's another hard word. So by this, what we mean is, especially some of the examples that we have been using focus on the case of India, but it applies to many other countries as well, that there has been a growing trend by governments, especially in the face of social media companies not doing sufficient content moderation, to force social media companies for various reasons to remove content actors through legislative and punitive actions. So for instance, in the case of India, there has been a very tense relationship between social media companies, the government, often also done for political purposes as a way of controlling the content that has been circulating in the country. And this is very growing in many countries, so there has been a sharp decline in freedom of the internet, according to reports where the governments have taken a more assertive role of trying to control the type of information that is being promoted. So we're trying to find out how these kind of folk theories online in social media communities, on internet communities, also help us understand how this might cause the trust and mistrust of the different type of state legislation related to platforms and content visibility moderation, and also help us understand how this kind of trend of digital authoritarianism might have impacted some of the debates that are emerging and how political information is being trusted. And in the last minute that I have available, if this is that I just want to conclude very quickly that what might this mean for the discussions we have been having today and for the Indonesian elections. So the key argument is that understanding how users comment, react to moderation practices, or this folklore, algorithmic or content moderation folklore, is important because it can influence how democracy processes are trusted more broadly, and work needs to be done around that to guarantee that people feel that the platforms where information share is fair and evenly distributed amongst different political parties, and the information can be trusted. And also, furthermore, in the face of generative AI, such folk knowledge of what is considered legitimate or authentic information will become increasingly important to understand in the age of political disinformation and generative AI. So what is fake, what is not, how is it being produced will become a very important topic that needs to be kind of taken into account of, especially among the young people. Running out of time, so in a way, what I propose is that looking at such moderation algorithmic folklore can provide one possible and humble, small research perspective to start understanding some of these dynamics. And I'm going to end here because I'm already 30 seconds above time, so I will try to get the last slide on. There we go.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Thank you, Mr. Matti. He is proposing a new approach to understand and address the issue of political disinformation and AI-generated content by shifting focus moves from questioning what platforms do to what users perceive the platform do. I think this is very new and interesting, and I hope also can incite more discussion. Next, we will have at least 10 minutes for Q&A. So if any of you have questions, please raise your hand and introduce yourself. The one with orange and the mask at the back.
Thank you for the time. I would like to ask Mr. Hafizh Nabiyyin a question. So, you mentioned earlier that our regulation on information and electronic transactions, they're actually regulated to prevent people from spreading misinformation. I'm sorry, my name is Arlene Siregar and I am from Atma Jaya University. Back to the question. So, at the moment, there are a lot of informations going on social medias, some are pro to some president candidates and some are like showcasing the bad side of these president candidates. Sometimes I'm intrigued to share, the information that are showcasing the bad sides of a certain president candidate. However, I'm afraid that I might get arrested for, hate comments and such. Well, actually, it's not hate comments, it's critical thinking. I see in your bio that you're head of freedom of expression. Now, how do you get away with it? I mean, you can share something that is negative, but it's not categorized as something hateful. Thank you.
The next question first. And
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Muhammad Putra from Diponegoro University. I'm in government studies major. So I want to ask about, maybe I want to explain a little bit about the background because I've seen that it's also my concern. I've seen in X, mostly Twitter, and there are some kind of disruption between the buzzers and the real information that exists. And there are some kind of segmentation of this information regards to maybe the refugees of Rohingya and even the Israel-Palestine conflicts. And there are some kind of thing that disrupting my kind of view according to the real information. What can we endure our families, our friends to trusting the information that exists in social media? But in terms of that, what kind of things that you guys can explain about the data and information governance that the government should apply according to such terms, the limitation of OIT and government regulation of Kominfo itself, and what kind of the agenda that can we press to the government regarding to these issues? Thank you.
Okay. First, I will ask Mr. Hafizh to answer the first question about how to get away from criminalization when posting critics for certain figures.
Oke, thank you untuk pertanyaannya tadi ya, Mbak Siregar tadi. Jadi sebenarnya tentang kebebasan berekspresi dan moderasi konten itu memang ada di semacam dua kutub yang berbeda gitu ya. On the one hand, we need to ensure we need to uphold the freedom of expression, but at the same time, we also need to protect the vulnerable groups from hate speech and also its impact in the physical realm. Tapi memang makanya sebenarnya there are several international human rights instruments that already addressing this issue. One of them is the Rabat Plan of Action, yang mana di situ dijelaskan tentang ada namanya 6-part threshold test. Jadi ketika kita ingin mempidanakan misalnya suatu ekspresi, itu memang dia harus yang benar-benar memiliki, dia udah melewati tes itu. Jadi harus dilihat dulu siapa yang menyebarkan, kemudian dilihat juga kontennya apa, dilihat juga konteksnya seperti apa. Kemudian dilihat juga kemungkinannya apakah ini kemudian memang memiliki kemungkinan untuk memicu terjadinya kekerasan di dunia nyata. Karena maksudnya kalau misalnya saya mengatakan di media sosial dengan followers yang nggak seberapa gitu ya, misalnya menghasut kekerasan terhadap kandidat tertentu atau pendukung kandidat tertentu, tentu dampaknya akan berbeda dengan misalnya orang-orang yang memiliki pengaruh, misal tokoh agama, Habib Rizik misalnya. Kalau misalnya dia nge-tweet kayak gitu itu mungkin bisa memicu kemarahan orang-orang dan likelihood to apa namanya untuk terwujud ya di dunia nyata menjadi kekerasan itu lebih besar. Jadi memang ada tolak ukur mana ekspresi yang sebenarnya itu masih sah dalam koridor freedom of expression, mana ekspresi yang seharusnya itu dihukum secara perdata atau administratif, mana ekspresi yang memang bisa dihukum secara pidana. Karena ada likelihoodnya itu. Jadi memang ada ukuran-ukurannya tuh, di situ ada indikator-indikator yang jelas dan rigid gitu. Tapi kalau kita melihat ke peraturan yang ada di Undang-Undang ITE maupun di KUHP itu kan nggak jelas ya. Maksudnya semua ekspresi sama aja. Atau di Permenkominfo 5 itu juga sama. Maksudnya konten-konten di take down itu konten-konten yang dianggap ilegal atau misalnya dianggap meresahkan masyarakat. Yang mana itu karet gitu kan. Dan itu sangat-sangat berbahaya. Nah, lalu pertanyaan bagaimana kemudian untuk menghindari itu ya. Sebenarnya kalau misalnya pengalaman kami di SAFEnet dalam mendampingi korban kriminalisasi itu sebenarnya memang sangat-sangat sulit bagi kita untuk membedakan mana ekspresi yang dianggap oleh penyelidik di kepolisian sebagai ekspresi yang sah dan mana ekspresi yang dianggap melanggar Undang-Undang ITE. Jadi memang pemahaman aparat kepolisian terhadap Undang-Undang ITE ini itu sangat-sangat rendah. Padahal kalau misalnya kita mengacu ke surat keputusan bersama yang memang sudah dikeluarkan oleh Menkominfo juga sejak tahun 2021 bersama Jaksa Agung dan Kapolri itu sudah jelas bahwasanya hate speech itu dia kalau misalnya memang ada ajakan yang jelas, ada ajakan, ada hasutan untuk membenci kelompok tertentu atau mempengaruhi kelompok tertentu untuk membenci kelompok tertentu. Tapi yang kejadian kan seringnya kayak kita ngasih penilaian, misalnya penilaian buruk terhadap suatu institusi atau kita menganggap suatu institusi tidak becus dan lain sebagainya. Kemudian itu dianggap sebagai pelanggaran kebebasan berekspresi. Jadi memang kalau secara secara hukum sebenarnya udah ada penjelasan di SKB yang mana sebagian juga diadopsi di undang-undang ITE yang terbaru. Tetapi di sisi lain pemahaman penyidik Polri itu masih sangat-sangat rendah. Jadi memang kalau misalnya mau aman, ini beberapa tips juga dari teman-teman jurnalis sebenarnya. Ketika kita ingin menyatakan sesuatu, kalau bisa itu kita pakai istilah diduga begitu atau misalnya didahului dengan kata misalnya disinyalir atau terindikasi gitu-gitu. Jadi kita nggak tembak langsung gitu ya. Nggak tembak langsung bilang, oh ini misalnya koruptor nih, oh ini misalnya jahat nih, ini nggak becus nih gitu kan. Tapi itu kata-kata yang biasanya digunakan untuk menyamarkan itu gitu sih. Misalnya untuk mencegah dikriminalisasi. Karena memang pemahaman aparat kepolisian terhadap hal ini itu memang sangat-sangat rendah. Gitu. Itu, Mbak. Apakah menjawab?
Okay, thank you, Mas Hafizh. It is very useful tips for like how to safely expressing your opinion on the internet, and I'm sure that all the other students can also learn further from the SAFEnet, checking their website or social media to learn more practical tips. And for the second question, I think it's for all other panelists about the limitation of the current regulation as well as possible agenda for the future. It is a $1 billion question. I think anyone want to start first?
Is the mic on? Mic is on. As you said, it is definitely a $1 billion question, but I think especially after Musk took over, we can see how arbitrary the content we receive or the mechanisms that control the content that we receive on social media is, and it applies also to other platforms. So the only kind of answer the $1 million questions, and I think the regulator or people who study regulation in the room might know about this better, is that in the Digital Services Act, if I'm not mistaken, there is a provision that forces digital platforms to turn off the recommender systems as an option for accessing content. And as a legislation that allows you to do unregulated or unrecommended feed for getting information that you want. So as a very simple fix, if that would become a reality, you could actually avoid getting a lot of the recommender system generated garbage that comes into your feed that you're discussing especially in X and Twitter, and especially in situation of conflict. So if we could actually have control over the stuff that we get, again, it goes against the business logics of many of these platforms. But if we could have a non-curated feed of your friends and information that you're interested in, that might solve a part of the problem, but not probably the bigger kind of digital economy problem that is there. But that's my only quick answer I can give you.
Okay. Well, it covers a lot of a lot of issues, but I'd like to focus on the policy making, the regulation making. So there are two parts. So first, the formal aspects of the making regulation. If you want to have a regulation that's sufficiently addresses the problems. First, and this is something that we are still lacking or not having enough, at least. First, is we need a regulation that is based on studies, on research, sufficient studies and research. So it's not just, okay, I give you a 6-month project and then I will write a regulation. No, it has to be a sufficient comprehensive research. Second, it has to be transparent, involving all stakeholders, industries, academics, civil society, because they have all this knowledge and also insights that you just mentioned earlier. These are very important when you formulate a regulation. So transparency involving stakeholders are very important. You cannot just simply ask people that you know, but you ask people who knows, who know the matters. And third I go directly to the content. That's a formal aspect, and a substantial aspect of it, the content of the regulation. I will propose for, first of all, a risk-based regulation. So you need to identify first what are the risks, where are the problems, and how to mitigate it. And if you want to mitigate a certain risk, you also need to evaluate the capabilities of the platform. Yeah. And also, second part is we need to balance out, to strike a delicate balance between different interests, different fundamental rights. We have this the right to be free from disinformation, hate speech, and so on. But on the other hand, you need also to protect the freedom of speech. But how? So you need these very specific measures and to do it. And one theory that we can use is this proportionality test that you can check what to do when one policy, one interest is colliding with the other. So that would be the short answer of it. And let's hear another panelist. Thank you.
Thank you, Bu Yuliana, and welcome. Selamat datang, Bapak Rahmat Bagja, Ketua Bawaslu RI. Selamat datang di CSIS. And next, okay, due to a time constraint, we will end the panel session. However, I want to mention that this panel is organized with partnership of Fakultas Hukum Atma Jaya, Universitas Atma Jaya, and the team from Atma Jaya also want to give a token of gratitude to all the panelists. And so I invite all the panelists to the center of the stage. Yeah, on behalf of, this is from Atma Jaya University, from the law faculty. A small token to all the panelists. Okay, and the organizer told me to take.
Okay, everyone, give a round of applause for our last session of the day. Thank you very much, Ms. Nurma and all of the panelists. Just here for a quick photo group.
Okay, thank you for all the panelists, Bu Yuliana, Mbak Irene, Mas Hafizh, and Mr. Matti.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nurma, and thank you to all of the speakers. We kindly request you to return to your seat as we are gonna wrap the event shortly. Okay, everyone, by concluding the fourth panel of KISIP 2024, we have reached the end of the event. Can I hear everyone's round of applause for the 2 days event of KISIP 2024? So we have engaged with a lot of stimulating discussion from yesterday and today. And for all of you, the audience who wants to access the papers, all of the papers that are being discussed yesterday and today, you can access it online in CSIS website. Just scan the barcode available on your booklet and you will be directed straight to the web link. And don't forget that we're gonna have lunch after this session. But one last thing before we can wrap up this event, there will be a special closing remarks that will be delivered by Mr. Rahmat Bahja, the chairman of Bawaslu Indonesia. So without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Rahmat Bahja upon the stage to deliver the closing remarks. Thank you very much, sir.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang teman-teman semua. Salam sejahtera. Bahasa or English? Bahasa aja ya. Karena 3/4, 80% ini orang Indonesia kan? Oke. Tapi yang mau Inggris ada juga presentasinya dalam bahasa Inggris. Silahkan bisa diakses dua-duanya. Teman-teman semua, menarik sekali pembahasan tentang disinformasi pada tahun 2024 ini. Tapi kita punya pembelajaran, kenapa ini menjadi perhatian kita semua? Karena kita punya pembelajaran besar dari mulai 2017, 2018, 2019. Pilkada DKI, permulaan Pilkada DKI 2017 yang awalnya tidak kita perkirakan bas dari media sosial, itu berakibat pada putaran kedua DKI. Yang akhirnya teman-teman bisa lihat. Sudah jadi pemilih nggak tahun 2018? Belum ya, kalau sudah berarti sudah jadi mahasiswa abadi teman-teman semua di sini. 2018 mungkin SMP atau SD itu ada banyak sekali. Misalnya calon presiden itu gara-gara entah itu diapakan ihromnya pada saat haji dibilang ihromnya tidak benar. Kemudian ada perlombaan salat mana yang paling benar dan mana yang paling soleh sedunia di calon presiden. Itu terjadi pada tahun 2019. Atau juga misalnya diisukan keturunan ras tertentu. Ini tahun 2019 dan 2017 itu sudah dimulai. Kita punya pengalaman 2018 ketika Pak Basuki Cahayapurnama menjadi calon gubernur. Oleh sebab itu, awalnya biasa-biasa saja Bawaslu menanggapi hal ini. Begitu meledak pada putaran kedua, prediksi kami akan terjadi permasalahan besar, disinformasi, dan juga politisasi identitas pada saat 2011. Dan akhirnya terjadi. Pembelajaran itulah yang membuat kami bersama-sama dengan teman-teman stakeholder yang ada CSIS, ada Google di sini tadi, ada teman-teman TikTok, dan juga beberapa platform yang ada, bahu-membahu untuk menurunkan persoalan-persoalan disinformasi dan misinformasi yang kemungkinan terjadi. Teman-teman mungkin tidak mengalami, ada isu misalnya ini, ini beredar. Satu ini dimulai dari Twitter, salah satu politisi partai. ada pengiriman 7 kontainer surat suara sudah tercoblos. Sekarang ada di pelabuhan Tanjung Priok. Satu itu dulu, tidak ditambah-tambahin. Kebetulan saya menerima informasi itu jam 10 malam. Kerjain kita bener itu teman-teman itu yang ngasih. Akhirnya kami jam 1 pagi ngecek semua kontainer melalui video yang ada di Syah Bandarnya Tanjung Priok. Ini Globe Ana yang ada pembongkaran, oh tidak ada. Pada jam 11 malam ditambahin lagi, 7 kontainer surat suara itu sudah tercoblos dan datang dari Cina. Semakin rahasia lagi ini. Surat suara mengenal ras juga rupanya. Itu juga jadi persoalan. Akhirnya kami cek tidak ada dan disinformasi itu sudah kadung menyebar. Bahkan penelitian kami bersama teman-teman tidak mengenal strata 1, S1, S2, S3, bahkan sekelas guru besar sendiri itu bisa termakan namanya disinformasi. Ini hal yang menarik. Kita belajar banyak dari tahun 2019 dan Bapak Ibu, kebanyakan Bapak Ibu nih sering. Jadi teman-teman semua belajar harus lihat pemilu Amerika tahun 2020. Baru kali itu pemilu di Amerika ada masa bisa menguasai menembus gedung Kongres. Itu gara-gara apa? Disinformasi. Salah satunya adalah perkembangan media sosial yang tidak kita antisipasi akibat dari informasi tersebut. Teman-teman semua, bagaimana kemudian Bawaslu melawan disinformasi? Sebagai pengantar, ini teman Fakultas Hukum ada? Penyelenggaranya Fakultas Hukum, tapi Fakultas Hukumnya paling sedikit. Oke. Fakultas Ilmu Santet, Ilmu Sosial dan Politik, salah? Ada juga, oke. Fakultas Ekonomi? Kalau di UI dulu Fakultas Ekonomi katanya sia-sia jadi menteri, bohong banget itu. Zaman jargon FEUI zaman dulu. Gak ada? Oke, Fakultas IT yang sekarang sangat menarik ini. IT, gak ada juga. Ini fakultas mana ya? Berarti teman-teman, berarti fakultas yang lain, ilmu budaya jangan-jangan. Bukan? Oke. Dalam kaitannya Bawaslu ini salah satu penyelenggara pemilu. Saya harus mengantarkan ini buat teman-teman semua. Jangan anggap Bawaslu ini bukan penyelenggara pemilu. Ada 3 penyelenggara pemilu Indonesia. Pertama, Komisi Pemilihan Umum. Penyelenggara utama pemilu adalah Komisi Pemilihan Umum. Ngurusin apa? Ngurusin semua tahapan. Misalnya nanti surat suara, pembuatan TPS, penyelenggaraan pemungutan suara, penyelenggaraan penghitungan suara akan ada pada Komisi Pemilihan Umum. Siapa yang mengawasinya? Namanya Badan Pengawas Pemilu. Kemudian siapa lagi? Selain itu adalah Dewan Kehormatan Penyelenggara Pemilu. Jadi kami punya Dewan Etik yang disebut sebagai Dewan Kehormatan Penyelenggara Pemilu. Nah, tugas kami adalah mendeteksi, menginvestigasi, dan menanggapi setiap potensi disinformasi yang dapat mempengaruhi hasil pemilihan. Pendeteksian itu melibatkan pemantauan terhadap berbagai sumber informasi, termasuk media sosial, situs web, dan jejaring komunikasi lainnya. Bawaslu tidak hanya berkewajiban untuk menanggapi laporan-laporan yang diterima, tapi juga untuk proaktif dalam mengidentifikasi dan menanggulangi potensi ancaman informasi yang palsu. Nah, teman-teman pernah beredar ini di media sosial. Itu Pak Presiden membagikan selebaran, saya harus nyebut nama salah satu presiden lah, capres. Tidak benar. Itu pada saat itu bukan salaman, jadi diganti foto tangannya dengan selebaran. Oke. Itu terjadi pada pemilu kali ini. Apakah ada disinformasi lain? Ada. Beberapa nanti kita akan lihat beberapa kasus tentang netralitas ASN. Ada yang benar, ada juga yang tidak. Jadi kita akan lihat beberapa perkembangan kasus. Kalau Garut itu benar. Yang tahu Garut? Udah PAD-nya katanya PAD-nya paling kecil di Jawa Barat. Nggak tahu sekarang. Permasalahan juga paling banyak. Pilkadanya itu 6 calon bupati. Padahal PAD-nya paling kecil. Semakin kecil PAD, semakin banyak peminatnya rupanya. Nah, kemudian karakternya apa sih? Karakter disinformasi dalam pemilu. Pertama adalah sifat menyesatkan atau bias dengan tujuan politik tertentu, penyebaran melalui media sosial, pemanfaatan teknologi deepfake, menargetkan kelompok sasaran tertentu, penyebaran pesan berantai. Teman-teman pernah dapat WA? Sangat mengagetkan. Udah jangan dibaca, sangat mengagetkan pasti. Pasti itu hoax biasanya. Kemudian tidak terduga, kalimat-kalimat tidak terduga itu bukan kalimat media. Itu pasti kalimat-kalimat media sosial. Kalau teman-teman sudah cukup informasi dari yang baik-baik saja, sekali dua kali saja memantau yang seperti itu. Tapi kalau teman-teman baca terus akan jadi masalah. Pembuatan akun palsu, memanipulasi fakta atau statistik, penggunaan propaganda visual. Nanti ada AI, akan jadi masalah lagi nih. Kejadian AI, tahu? Kejadian AI? Kejadiannya pidatonya Pak Presiden pada saat itu kemudian dipakai bahasa Tiongkok, bahasa Cina. Padahal bukan bahasa Tiongkok, bahasa Indonesia atau bahasa Inggris pada saat itu. Kalau lihat bibirnya, mirip ya, jangan jagoan bener ini Pak Jokowi bahasa Cinanya, bener-bener. Sudah mulai itu. Nah, itu yang terjadi. Sudah mulai sekarang memanipulasi fakta atau statistik atau membuat teknologi deepfake sebutannya ya. Kemudian dampak negatifnya, dampak negatif informasi pada pemilu. Kualitas pemilu menurun. Teman-teman akan terbawa misalnya. Yang ini memang bermasalah besar, pakai A dan B, C. Nah, kemudian juga membuat teman-teman tidak rasional. Memilih peserta pemilu tertentu berdasarkan emosi. Yang akan disasar oleh disinformasi adalah emosi. Kemudian merusak rasionalitas. Merusak rasionalitas pasti. Sudah saatnya kita kemudian dalam pelajaran berbangsa bernegara ini meninggalkan namanya sentimen rasial. Sudah saatnya ditinggalkan. Zamannya udah nggak zaman lagi. Sentimen rasial, mohon maaf, dia keturunan A, keturunan B, ras tertentu, ini sudah nggak zaman lah. Dan saatnya kita menuju yang baru ini. Karena pertarungan nanti ke depan adalah pertarungan kualitas, bukan pertarungan ras tertentu, tidak. Walaupun teman-teman FISIP yang pernah belajar teori Clash of Civilization ya pasti akan belajar tentang hal tersebut. Walaupun itu agak-agak, menurut saya ada kritik juga terhadap Bapak Samuel Huntington itu, berikut Pak Francis Fukuyama. Agak kritik terhadap, ya teman-teman bisa baca, teman-teman FISIP pasti sering baca yang beginian. Nah, jadi hal ini sudah kita tanggal dalam pelajaran berbangsa dan bernegara. Merusak rasionalitas, pasti merusak rasionalitas. Apa hubungannya pemilihan gubernur dengan menyolatkan mayat? Gak ada hubungannya. Tapi terjadi pada pilkada 2018. Jika pilihannya gubernur A, maka jamaat masjid ini dilarang menyolatkan mayat yang bersangkutan. Wis, ini hubungan dunia bawa ke akhirat saudara-saudara. Jadi sudah meninggal pun kita masih diminta pertanggungjawaban. Ini jadi masalah besar. Kami akhirnya menurunkan alat peraga, spanduk-spanduk di beberapa masjid. Ini kejadian, ini fakta. Ini fakta. Kami turunkan dan diprotes oleh pengurus masjid. Bagi kami itu masalah besar. Jangan aneh-aneh lah. Kita berbangsa bernegara ini sudah 78 tahun, sudah meninggalkan hal seperti ini. Kemudian juga akan dimintai pertanggungjawaban dan tata pilihan, iya silahkan saja, nanti di akhirat nanti akan terbuktinya, bukan kemudian di dunia ini juga dimintai pertanggungjawaban, ya agak masalah. Diminta pertanggungjawaban apa ketika Anda salah milih? Tahukah Anda, kenapa kemudian kualitas jalan memburuk, kualitas transportasi memburuk, pajak tambah naik, salah satunya adalah jika kemudian DPR tidak mengawasi pemerintahan dengan baik. Salah satunya itu. Kalau DPR-nya kemudian pilih karena mohon maaf sering goyang-goyang akan jadi masalah. Atau sering banyak nampil di TV misalnya. Yang penting lucu. Betul nggak? Ada nih yang penting lucu kok. Iya, nanti Anda melihat kelucuan itu sampai ke DPR. Bisa dibayangkan tuh, kelucuan tuh sampai DPR akan jadi masalah tuh. Kecuali sekarang saatnya teman-teman bisa ngundang debat para caleg itu. Yang komedian itu bisa disuruh debat bagaimana dia menceritakan atau menjelaskan dengan komedi yang menarik tentang pembangunan negara. Menurut versi dia. Belum pernah ada teman-teman, karena kami memantik teman-teman untuk mengundang teman-teman caleg yang demikian. Kenapa? Kita harus menyampaikan kepada publik bahwa visi, misi itu harus dinilai oleh teman-teman semua. Mengancam demokrasi, kalau sudah bawaannya mohon maaf, bawaannya sudah surga neraka, itu pasti mengancam demokrasi. Saya harus cerita di keluarga saya. Saya anggota Bawaslu periode dahulu, 2017-2022, itu antara bapak dan kakak saya beda pilihan capres. Akhirnya apa yang terjadi? Satu menyatakan, jangan jadi anak durhaka. Repot ini. Durhaka bro. Kemudian dibalas sama kakak saya, jangan jadi orang tua tidak mengerti anak. Dapat dibayangkan. Begitu selesai tugas di kantor, saya datang ke rumah untuk memediasi dua orang tersebut. Karena sudah tidak ngomong selama 3 hari. Itu mengerikan. Dan saya yakin Mas pasti mengalami hal yang sama. Entah di keluarga inti ataupun di keluarga besar. Tahun 2019. Kemudian disintegrasi. Teman-teman pernah tahu kejadian tahun 2019, 21 atau 22 Juni? Kami itu dalam Bawaslu biasanya itu hanya simulasi kerusuhan di gedung Bawaslu. Tapi di tahun 2019 kami tidak simulasi kerusuhan, praktek terjadinya kerusuhan. Ya, dilempar pertama oleh bom Molotov. Itu masuk Times kalau nggak salah. Baru kali itu mungkin gedung penyelenggara dilempar bom Molotov, sebelah kirinya itu. Dan kebetulan saya masih ada di gedung itu. Ngeri-ngeri sedap itu pada saat itu. Ya kita berpasrah diri sama Tuhan lah pada saat itu. Nah, dapat teman-teman bayangkan jika salah satu pihak itu tidak menahan diri. Entah itu yang capres A ataupun capres B. Kalau terjadi, misalnya, ini mitigasi ya. Kalau terjadi misalnya, capres tersebut datang ke tanggal 21 tersebut, pada satu bulan puasa loh, untuk sholat taraweh berjamaah. Tiba-tiba ada peluru nyasar, kena capres itu, apa yang terjadi? Saya akan yakin, seyakin-yakinnya, pergerakan massa dari seluruh Indonesia akan terjadi. Dan itu salah satu skenario ketiga. Nah akhirnya kemudian kami harus mitigasi. Untung tidak terjadi. Kami misalnya melalui jalur informal tertentu meminta kepada capres yang bersangkutan untuk tidak datang. Karena tidak tahu masa kerumunan massa itu akan bawa apa. Dibayangkan nggak jika ada yang tertembak misalnya, capres dan cawapres tertembak, masuk rumah sakit, apa yang terjadi? Belah bangsa ini, yakin saya. Akan belah bangsa ini. Nah itulah yang terjadi jika para pihak peserta pemilu yang besar-besar ini tidak bisa menahan diri. Oleh sebab itu, akan lanjut nanti ke konflik sosial. Kita tidak mau Indonesia akan menjadi the new Syria misalnya. Nggak boleh terjadi. Jadi tanggung jawab teman-teman yang sekarang pakai jaket alma mater ini adalah tanggung jawab itu. Kata siapa? Nggak ada. Negara kita ini negara paling heterogen, banyak suku. Paling gampang ini untuk kemudian dipicu meledaknya. Kejadian Poso, Ambon, dan kawan-kawan, ledakannya melalui ledakan agama. Tapi permasalahannya bukan hanya agama. Ada ekonomi, sosial, dan kawan-kawan. Diletupkannya paling gampang lewat agama. Kalau lewat agama, siapapun juga itu akan terpantik. Nah, oleh sebab itu, teman-teman yang jaket alma mater ini harus bersikap rasional dalam memandang seluruh perselisihan pemilu nanti ke depan. Jadi, konflik sosial kemungkinan akan terjadi, disintegrasi bangsa kemungkinan akan terjadi. Lewat apa? Lewat disinformasi, misinformasi, hoax, dan politisasi SARA. Apa strateginya? Literasi digital, walaupun literasi digital menurut teman-teman Kominfo sudah banyak dilakukan. Tapi saya masih agak yakin nih teman-teman nih, apalagi yang mahasiswa, kebanyakan chat GPT jangan-jangan. Sudah jarang baca buku lagi, sudah jarang nulis. Pakai chat GPT aja paling gampang, temanya ini paling gampang, betul kan? Kebetulan saya dosen dulu, jadi ngerti. Mana yang kemudian, makanya ada alatnya juga untuk ngecek ini dia pakai tulisan orang apa enggak, itu langsung kelihatan. Oh ya, dia pakai tulisan orang. Dan paling menyenangkan itu ketika pakai tulisan orang paling gampang. Coret satu halaman itu, ganti satu halaman lagi. Bukan tulisan yang bersangkutan. Kalau semakin banyak salahnya, berarti yang bersangkutan nulis. Kalau makin bagus tulisannya, wah ini pasti masalah ini. Jadi hati-hati ya teman-teman mahasiswa yang sekarang lagi membuat beberapa tugas, paper dan kawan-kawan. Kemudian pengawasan digital, laporkan kepada kami jika ada masalah. Walaupun kemudian teman-teman Kominfo pada 2022, periode 2020-2022 telah men-take down sekitar 2000 konten-konten bermasalah di media sosial. Kemudian kerjasama dengan platform digital, dengan Google, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, dan kawan-kawan. Walaupun ada satu masalah di Indonesia. Teman-teman Facebook dan teman-teman Google mention ini. Satu, misalnya kalau Facebook di Amerika, hukum Amerika itu membolehkan para pemilih itu mengkritik keras, bahkan aneh-aneh kepada capresnya. Di kita tidak boleh, kita dilarang. Menghina dilarang. Di Amerika itu masuk dalam freedom of speech. Di kita tidak. Oleh sebab itu, makanya kami melakukan koordinasi dengan teman-teman Facebook, Twitter, dan Google misalnya, mana yang kemudian oke, mana kemudian yang tidak. Menurut hukum Indonesia. Jadi disesuaikan dengan hukum Indonesia. Itulah untuk kerjasama dengan platform digital. Karena pasti berbeda hukum Amerika dengan hukum Indonesia. Nah, kami berterima kasih kepada teman-teman platform yang bahu-membahu untuk menurunkan perdebatan di media sosial tentang hoax dan kawan-kawan. Hoax sudah mulai agak hilang. Teman-teman ikut Facebook nggak? Pasti teman-teman ikut Facebook ya, generasi 2000-an ini. Ada laporannya kan, bisa report kan, kalau ada masalah kan. Nah, TikTok juga demikian, Twitter juga demikian. Jadi sudah dibuka sekarang. Jika menganggap ini bermasalah, tinggal laporkan. Nanti mereka akan meneliti hal tersebut dalam platformnya. Itulah bagusnya sekarang pada teman-teman platform digital. Kampanye edukasi dan sosialisasi, ini sudah dilakukan. Literasi digital dilakukan oleh Bawaslu, misalnya Jarimu Awasi Pemilu, ada beberapa platform yang kami lakukan dengan teman-teman yang hadir dalam Jarimu Awasi Pemilu. Nanti coba teman-teman lihat, walaupun tidak, ya masih dalam proses di kami untuk memperbaiki terus-menerus. Kemudian lanjut, materi, sudah terima kasih ini. Oke, misalnya materi edukasi tentang bentuk grafis dan kawan-kawan. Mohon maaf, di sini kebanyakan orang Jakarta ya. Angker, oh bukan angker. Jangan sudah pakai mobil semua. Kalau saya termasuk angker dulu, anak kereta maksudnya. Bogor, Cilebut, Bojonggede, Depok, Citayam, dan akhirnya sampai Depok. Disebut angker. Nggak ada ya, nggak ada yang masuk angker? Oke. Kami misalnya menyediakan informasi-informasi tentang bagaimana sebuah transaksi politik uang dilakukan. Enggak ngajarin bentuknya, tapi menjelaskan bahwa ini tidak boleh, apa yang tidak boleh, apa yang boleh. Sudah menarik konten-konten di Bawaslu Provinsi juga sudah buat, akhirnya teman-teman Bawaslu di daerah, itu berkat Google dan kawan-kawan, berkat para platform digital ini, sudah mulai merekam, membuat video-video tentang apa itu politik uang, apa itu politisasi SARA dan kawan, apa itu netralitas ASN TNI Polri. Sudah buat teman-teman bisa lakukan juga. Nanti kita bersama-sama untuk melakukan hal ini. Dan jangan lupa teman-teman, sekarang tanggal 21 Januari nanti adalah kampanye di media elektronik. TV, radio, dan kawan-kawan sudah mulai dilakukan. Kemudian siap-siap juga untuk mengawasi rapat umum. Siap-siap akan ada kemacetan mulai tanggal 21 Januari. Karena rapat umum, metode rapat umum sudah dilakukan sampai dengan 10 Februari. Dan kemudian juga pasti nanti di media sosial akan semakin lebih banyak lagi. Dan kemudian kita bersama-sama mengawasi alat peraga. Kami sekarang concern terhadap alat peraga yang sebenarnya sudah tidak up to date ya. Betul nggak sih di Jakarta masih perlu nggak sih pasang spanduk banyak-banyak? Masih perlu? Nggak perlu kan tiba-tiba ketiban orang jadi pidana kasusnya. Katanya nyampah, terus ketiban orang bisa masuk penjara juga tim kampanyenya. Perlu bagi caleg sebenarnya nggak perlu. Kalau surat suara, pernah lihat surat suara caleg nggak? Itu nggak ada gambarnya, cuma nama doang. Nggak perlu sebenarnya panjang foto segede alaihim gitu, kemudian pilihlah saya, nggak perlu banget itu. Tinggal nomornya dia, namanya dia selesai. Visi misinya apa? Sudah. Tapi nggak tahu. Oke, teman-teman perlu ngajarin teman muda ini bagaimana cara melakukan kampanye yang baik dan benar. Ayo bantu teman-teman caleg. Bukan saya ini ya, tapi bantu teman-teman itu melakukan kampanye yang sesuai dengan metode anak-anak muda sekarang. Ya, tidak kemudian ada pemakaian, kalau kita hitung misalnya pemakaian kayu, bambu, itu juga merusak itu. Kalau kita sebut sebagai green election, kita tidak green ini. Kita tidak punya green election di sini, di Indonesia ini. Kayu, bambu, spanduk, dan kawan-kawan. Habis itu sampahnya di mana-mana. Habis itu tanggal 11 Februari, semua alat peraga itu harus dicopot. Sampahnya kemana? Sampahnya jadi terpal tukang bakso dan kawan-kawan. Walaupun ada yang dibakar juga. Nah itu yang terjadi. Ada juga yang nyampah kemana-mana. Inilah tiba-tiba teman-teman pasti lihat, kalau naik gunung, misalnya gunung gede, kok tiba-tiba ada masang alat peraga di pohon daerah gunung, kan siapa yang lihat? Kan mohon maaf, binatang di gunung kan tidak memilih, ngapain mereka pasang alat peraga di sana. Jadi itu perlu diajarkan oleh teman-teman yang baru sekarang. Nah teman-teman, PR kita sekarang sudah mulai kelihatan, teman-teman platform digital sudah mulai banyak membantu, disinformasi sudah semakin menurun, tapi ini belum naik juga sepertinya. Tanggal 21 akan naik, sepertinya akan naik. Dan kalau ada putaran kedua kapan? Pilpres putaran kedua. Kalau terjadi putaran kedua, maka akan ada pada akhir Juni tahun 2024. Kapan pilkada? Pilkada pada November 2024. Mohon maaf, pilkadanya seluruh Indonesia, tidak bergelombang lagi. Jadi bisa dibayangkan nih. Paling banyak berantem di mana? Tidak di pemilu nasional. Yang paling banyak clash tingkat daerah adalah pada saat pilkada. Jadi PR teman-teman banyak, nanti isunya kalau di media sosial pada saat pilkada akan lebih lokal daripada di pemilu nasional. Jadi teman-teman, tugas teman-teman semakin banyak. Saya ingat ini, bentar, mahasiswa banyak ya? Ada yang mahasiswa nggak? Saya mahasiswa juga, tapi S3, nggak tamat-tamat ini. Mahasiswa? Oke. Ada satu adagium yang saya pegang sekarang, dari dulu. Ada 3 kehidupan mahasiswa yang tidak boleh terlupa. 1 buku jurnal dan kawan-kawan. 2 cinta, 3 pesta. Pesta itu apa? Pesta demokrasi, milik ketua BEM itu pesta. Kapan Anda dilobi oleh calon ketua BEM? Pada saat itu, itulah. Dan kapan Anda dapat makan Indomie gratis? Ya pada saat itu. Dulu masih Indomie zaman-zaman saya. Zaman Anda nggak tahu ya. Nah, hitung mati. Entah itu pestanya, bentuknya, pertemuan mahasiswa, kemudian pemilihan badan eksekutif, atau juga entah apapun juga. Salah satunya pesta mahasiswa ada pada saat ini. Awasi pesta yang dilakukan oleh negara ini. Teman-teman, kalau bisa mengawasi akan menerima nanti hasilnya bahwa pemilu kita akan semakin baik. Dan beberapa prediksi teman-teman ilmu sosial dan ilmu politik, pemilu ke-6 dalam era demokrasi menentukan jalan naik atau turunnya demokrasi di suatu bangsa. Pemilu ke-6 kapan? Setelah era demokrasi, tahun 2024. Ini akan menentukan naik atau turun indeks demokrasi kita ke depan. Jadi, tanggung jawab ada di teman-teman semua. Jadilah orang yang perhatian terhadap nasib bangsa, dan lihatlah demokrasi Indonesia yang akan semakin lebih baik. Dan salah satunya teman-teman, Anda mewarisi negara kepulauan demokratis terbesar di dunia. Dan dilaksanakan pemungutan suaranya pada 1 hari. Orang Indonesia agak gendeng dikit lah, 1 hari itu. Amerika punya namanya preliminary election, kita enggak. Jadi 1 hari itu harus selesai dari Sabang sampai Merauke. Kalau teman-teman ingin bergabung dengan penyelenggara pemilu, teman-teman bisa melihat begitu rumit dan kompleksnya penyelenggaraan pemilu di Indonesia dengan kendala geografis, kendala pulau dan lain-lain. Dan begitu beragamnya budaya kita. Nah, tanggung jawab kita mewarisi negara yang paling besar ini, negara kepulauan terbesar di dunia ini. Jadi kita harapkan teman-teman punya tanggung jawab untuk ikut dalam melakukan pengawasan disinformasi, misinformasi pada pemilu tahun 2024 ini. Selamat teman-teman mahasiswa, jangan lupa ya, 1 kata, lawan jangan ya. Nanti saya masih ingat tuh, bahaya. Ke depan tanggung jawab dari teman-teman semua, dan saya mengharapkan teman-teman akan menjadi penerus demokratik terbesar di Indonesia ini, dan akan meneruskan perjuangan-perjuangan para senior-senior ini yang tadi ngobrol, itu sudah masanya hampir selesai. Saya juga nanti 10 tahun lagi mungkin sudah tidak ini, teman-teman yang akan kemudian mewarnai bagaimana jalannya demokrasi Indonesia. Terima kasih kepada CSIS, Google, dan Safer Internet Lab dalam acara ini. Sekali lagi mohon maaf jika ada yang salah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, salam sejahtera.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmad Bagja. We request you to stay on the stage because we're about to take a quick photo group. I would like to call upon the stage Miss Ariana Santoso from Google Indonesia, Mrs. Anita Wahid from Public Virtue Research Institute, Mr. Beltazar Krisetya from CSIS Indonesia, and Mr. Niki Fahrizal from CSIS Indonesia to take a quick photo group with Mr. Ahmad Bagja. One, two, say cheese. Neutral pose. Okay, thank you very much everyone. Please kindly return to your seats as we will wrap up the event shortly. Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, with the closing remarks from Bawaslu Indonesia, it marks the end of KISIP 2024. May I hear rounds of applause from everyone? Now, before we wrap up this event, I would like to remind the audience once again that you can access all of the papers discussed today and yesterday from scanning the QR code available on the booklet. And there are still some goodie bags left for everyone who wants to have a goodie bag. Please fill the feedback form that will be displayed in the screen. So you can scan this barcode and fill the feedback form. And then there will be a goodie bag available. Only one person, one goodie bag each. And also don't forget to follow Instagrams at CSIS Indonesia and at SAFEnet Lab. So fill the feedback form, follow the 2 Instagrams, and then you can have a goodie bag. By ending the KISIP 2024, I would like to say thank you very much to all of the committee, to all of the media partners. Thank you to Savor Internet Lab. Thank you to the Department of Politics and Social Change at CSIS Indonesia. Thank you to Google Indonesia, and thank you to our university partner, Monash University, Universitas Prasetya Mulia, Universitas Atma Jaya, and Universitas Islam International Indonesia. With that being said, I am Johanna Parida, and thank you very much to everyone. See you at KISIP 2025. Please grab your lunch available in the pre-functional area. Thank you everyone, have a good day.